All right, let's dive in. Today we're heading back to the California Gold Rush.
Yeah,
But
that's a rush.
with a bit of a twist. We're not going to be talking about, striking it rich or
Right.
finding those golden nuggets.
Yep.
We're going deeper
Much deeper.
into the untold stories.
Yeah, the human cost.
The human cost of the gold rush.
Definitely.
The folks who were already there. The Native Americans.
Makes sense.
Who called California home long before
anybody even thought about gold.
before the gold rush even hit.
Yeah.
Our source material today
This is a good one.
is an episode of American History Tellers,
Called Battle Lines.
and it's called Battle Lines.
Yeah, it really unpacks that human cost
It does
that we
not.
don't often hear about.
Yeah, a side of the story that you don't get in the history books.
No, you don't.
So just picture it.
Okay.
1849.
All right.
California's booming,
Population exploding.
and everyone is
Yeah.
chasing gold.
Absolutely.
But what was life really like?
That's the question.
The Native American tribes
For the people who were already there,
at this time.
yeah, that's where things get really interesting.
Yeah.
Because, a lot of people,
Right.
they think of California as this sort of
Untouched wilderness.
untouched wilderness, right? Before the gold rush.
Yeah.
But the reality
Yeah.
is very, very different.
Okay.
The Miwok, the Nissan,
So many
and countless other tribes,
Yeah.
they had built thriving societies here
For centuries.
for centuries before the gold rush.
Wow.
Yeah, they weren't just surviving, they
Right.
were flourishing.
Wow.
We're talking established villages,
Really?
intricate customs, and a really deep connection
Wow.
to the land.
So they weren't just nomadic tribes wandering around.
Not at all.
Okay.
They had these sophisticated systems for fishing, hunting, gathering acorns, processing acorns for food.
Wow.
They had really unique traditions like tattooing,
Oh, interesting.
which wasn't just body art. It was really deeply tied to their culture and beliefs.
So understanding this world
Yeah.
before the gold rush
Before the gold rush.
is really important.
Yeah, it's crucial to understanding the real impact
Right.
of what was to come.
So this is already painting a very different picture
Right.
than what I learned in school.
Yeah, and then of course there's the
Right.
whole impact of the Spanish missions.
Exactly.
Right.
Which started way before
Right before the gold rush.
the gold rush. Yeah.
Back in the 1700s.
1700s. Yeah.
Yeah, the missions are a really critical piece
Okay.
of this whole puzzle.
Right.
Imagine this.
Right.
Imagine being forced into labor.
Okay.
Your whole way of life disrupted.
Wow.
And then on top of that,
Yeah.
disease is just ravaging your community.
Wow.
So by the late 1840s,
Yeah.
the Native American population had been cut in half
What?
from 300,000
300,000.
down to 150,000
That's
before the gold rush even starts.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah, it really makes you wonder,
Yeah.
was the gold rush just the final blow
Wow.
to a population that was already
Yeah.
really deeply wounded?
That's heartbreaking to think about.
Yeah.
So you have this wave of gold-hungry prospectors
Okay.
arriving.
Yeah.
But surprising.
And this is the thing that I think a lot of people don't realize
Okay.
is that some Native Americans
Yeah.
actually got involved
Really?
in the gold rush.
Wow.
At first,
Okay.
some Native Americans,
Interesting.
they saw it as an opportunity.
Just like everyone else.
Just like everyone else,
Oh.
they mined for gold.
Okay.
Some even started businesses.
Really?
Yeah, it wasn't just this instant
Right.
hostility like
Yeah.
you might expect.
So if there was this initial period of,
Right?
well, maybe not cooperation,
Yeah.
but at least
The
participation.
Participation?
Yeah.
What changed?
That's a great question. Why did things turn?
Yeah, what? It's so violent.
Yeah. Well, that shift
Yeah.
really began
Okay.
with the arrival of miners
From Oregon?
from Oregon
Yeah.
in 1849.
Okay.
They already had a reputation for being really hostile towards Native Americans.
Okay.
And that attitude,
Right.
it just spread like wildfire.
Wow.
There's this chilling example in the podcast
Okay.
of Nissan women being raped,
Oh, wow.
which then triggered retaliatory killings.
Oh, gosh.
So it was this horrific cycle of violence
Right.
that escalated really, really quickly.
That's where the podcast really gets under your skin.
with these
It's tough to hear these.
just
things.
gut-wrenching stories of brutality.
But,
There's one anecdote.
they force us to confront the
Yeah.
reality of what happened.
Yeah. And you have to remember,
Okay.
too,
Okay.
California wasn't even a state yet.
Really?
There was basically no law enforcement.
Wow.
So
It wasn't, the romanticized Wild West.
Right.
It was a lawless and dangerous place.
Necessarily for Native Americans.
For Native Americans.
Yeah, you've got this chaotic mix of greed and prejudice and a lack of accountability.
And just a recipe.
A recipe for
disaster.
For disaster.
Absolutely.
But then there's this glimmer of hope.
Okay.
Right?
What?
California is moving towards statehood.
Okay.
There's a constitutional convention.
Uh-huh.
Maybe this is a chance for things to change.
Maybe this is a chance for a fresh start.
Yeah.
There was definitely a chance for a fresh start. The podcast tells this story of a young delegate at the 1849 convention who actually tries to advocate for Native American voting rights.
Really?
He even has this seemingly sympathetic conversation with the chairman, Kim Dimmick.
Mm-hmm. And for a moment,
you
think maybe they'll listen.
Right.
Maybe justice will prevail.
Yeah, you kind of get your hopes up.
Yeah, you get your hopes up.
Like, okay, maybe they'll do the right thing.
Thinking, okay, this is going to work out.
Yeah.
But then
there's this crushing twist.
Oh,
despite the promises and the seemingly sympathetic conversations, voting rights for Native Americans are denied. And Dimmick himself casts the deciding vote, breaking a tie.
Wow, so he really had the power there.
Yeah, it just shows how quickly ideals can be abandoned.
Right.
When power and prejudice are
at play.
It's
that sinking feeling of realizing that this wasn't just a political decision. It was setting the stage. For generations of injustice. And to make things worse.
Yeah.
The podcast.
This is where it gets really bad.
Okay.
The podcast introduces these two brothers. The Kelseys. Who really become the poster children for this whole brutal system. The Kelsey brothers and their Napa Valley ranch offer this really chilling look into the everyday horrors faced by Native Americans.
Oh, that's what we're talking.
We're talking forced labor. Whippings, beatings.
Wow.
Andrew Kelsey was even known to rape Pomo women.
Wow.
So it was this horrific reality for the Pomo and Wapo tribes were essentially enslaved on their ranch.
The podcast really zooms in
on
the story of two Pomo workers. Shook and Zesus. Their starving village sends them on this desperate mission to steal a cow from the Kelsey ranch.
What cow?
That's a high-stakes gamble.
It's a huge gamble.
Yeah.
And of course it goes wrong. But what's so striking about this is how this seemingly small act highlights this extreme
power imbalance.
That was at play.
So for these workers, even a missing horse could mean death. Wow.
So it really
makes you feel the desperation of their situation. So they're trapped. They're starving. And they're facing
this
unimaginable cruelty. What choice do they have left?
Well, the podcast takes us inside this really tense meeting in a reed hut where a Pomo elder proposes something unthinkable.
What's that?
Fighting back.
Wow.
It's a last resort. A desperate attempt to break free
from this cycle of abuse. And that's where we'll pick up in the next part.
Sounds good.
Of our deep dive. But before we go, what's standing out to you so far?
Oh, man.
What's hitting you hardest about this story?
I think it's just the level of calculated cruelty. You know, that's just really hard to process. The fact that this wasn't just a few bad apples. This was a system designed to oppress and exploit
Native Americans.
And it's just horrifying.
Yeah, it's tough to hear, but it's important to know about.
It is.
We have to understand.
Yeah, we can't just brush this under the rug. This is a part of our history.
It is.
And we need to confront it.
Exactly.
So, yeah, it's heavy stuff.
But
it's important stuff.
Yeah, it is.
And I'm glad we're talking about it.
Me too.
Yeah.
All right, well, we'll be back with part 2.
Looking forward to.
Of this deep dive, so stay tuned.
Definitely.
We'll be right back.
All right.
That image of that Pomo elder proposing that they fight back.
Yeah.
It just gives me chills.
It's a powerful moment.
It really highlights the desperation they were facing.
It shows that the violence wasn't unprovoked. It was a direct response to years of oppression.
And abuse.
And abuse. Yeah, but the podcast does a great job of not glorifying the violence, but presenting it as this tragic consequence.
Of the situation.
Yeah.
The attack on Andrew Kelsey and Charles Stone.
Right.
Must have been incredibly tense.
Yeah, incredibly risky.
Incredibly risky. Were they successful?
They were.
Okay.
The podcast describes the attack in detail.
And it's clear.
And it's clear that it wasn't...
That it wasn't just some
random act of aggression.
Right.
It was a calculated, desperate attempt.
To regain some control.
To regain some control.
Over their lives.
Over lives.
But we know retaliation from the white settlers was swift and brutal.
It was.
Does the podcast go into detail about this?
It does, and it's a difficult part of the story to hear.
I bet.
There's an account of this Christmas Day massacre.
Oh, wow.
By U.S. dragoons.
Wow.
And then there were vigilante groups.
My gosh.
Going around scalping victims.
So it was a complete...
It was a complete bloodbath.
Bloodbath. That's just horrific.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, was this just a few people taking things too far?
Yeah, was it just...
Or was it something more systematic?
A few bad apples, or was it something more...
Organized.
What's really disturbing
is
that this wasn't just a case of a few individuals going rogue.
Right.
The California government actually funded and supported these acts of violence.
So it was state-sanctioned.
It was state-sanctioned brutality.
That's just mind-blowing.
Yeah, it's hard to...
And what about justice for the victims?
Right.
Was anyone held accountable?
Well, that's the...
Of these massacres?
Most frustrating part.
Okay.
The Kelsey brothers.
Who were responsible for...
so much suffering.
So much suffering.
They walked free.
Really?
And despite all the killings, the podcast highlights that only one white man was convicted.
Of murdering a Native American.
Murdering a Native American in 1850.
One.
That's
unbelievable.
It's as if the lives of Native Americans... held no value in the eyes of the law.
And even then, what happened to that one man?
He got a ridiculously light sentence.
It's just unbelievable.
It's a really...
So you have this escalating cycle of violence. Fueled by racism and greed.
Yeah.
But then President Fillmore enters the picture.
Right.
Didn't he try to intervene?
Yeah, he did.
And create reservations?
He thought
the Native Americans.
That by moving Native Americans onto designated lands, that he could protect them and reduce conflict.
So that seems like a step in the right direction.
Well, he even went so far as negotiating treaties with various tribes.
But didn't we talk earlier about Chief Bautista?
Yes.
The leader of the raid on the trading post?
Yes.
Wasn't he involved in those treaty negotiations?
He was. And the podcast captures this really poignant moment where you can just sense Chief Bautista's skepticism.
Yeah.
He'd seen promises broken before.
Right.
And he wasn't about to be fooled again.
So was he right to be skeptical?
Unfortunately, yes.
Oh, no.
The treaties, despite being signed by various tribes, were completely ignored by the U.S. Senate. They never ratified them.
Really?
Rendering them meaningless.
That's just heartbreaking.
It is.
Can you imagine?
Yeah.
The hope.
The trust.
The trust that must have been shattered.
Yeah.
When those treaties were
It's a betrayal.
Tossed aside.
On a massive scale.
It's a betrayal on a massive scale.
Yeah.
And in this case, the consequences were devastating. Native Americans were forced onto reservations.
Right.
Only to find
that
even those lands weren't
safe.
So the treaties had promised...
vast tracts of land.
Okay.
But what they ultimately received was a fraction of that.
Like what percentage?
Less than 2%.
2%.
It was a calculated and deliberate betrayal.
So after all the violence,
the
broken treaties, the forced removal, what was the ultimate human cost?
The numbers are staggering.
Of this gold rush.
An estimated 15,000.
15,000.
More Native Americans.
Were killed
after the treaties were broken.
After the treaties.
So by the mid-1850s,
yeah,
the Native American population
had plummeted
to just 30,000.
30,000. That's...
Yeah, it's hard to even fathom.
It's genocide.
It is.
A systematic and deliberate destruction of an entire people.
a painful chapter.
It's a dark and painful chapter in American history.
Yeah.
And it's one that we can't afford to forget.
And we need to remember that.
And we need to remember that.
This isn't just ancient history.
Right. It's
the legacy of this violence and injustice.
Yeah, it has a direct impact.
Continues to impact Native American communities.
On people's lives today.
In California today.
I'm noticing a shift in the story now.
Okay.
The podcast mentions that by the mid-1850s, the easy gold was gone.
Right.
What happened next?
So the gold rush was entering a new phase.
Yeah.
One dominated by industrial mining techniques.
So these were like big.
Yeah. These new methods were far more destructive.
Okay.
They required massive amounts of land and resources.
And I imagine that had an even greater impact.
You're exactly right.
On the environment.
The devastation continued.
And the remaining Native American communities.
Forests were cleared, rivers were polluted, and Native Americans were further displaced from their ancestral lands.
So the gold rush, in many ways, marked the beginning of a new era of environmental exploitation.
Yeah, that's a really
California
insightful connection.
It's almost like the gold rush itself was a microcosm of the larger story of American expansion. You know, the initial wave of individual prospectors gave way to large-scale corporations with profit-taking precedence.
Over people and the environment.
Over people and the environment.
Yeah.
That's a really important question.
What responsibility?
What responsibility do we have?
Do we have to remember and learn from this history?
How can we ensure that the mistakes of the past aren't repeated?
You don't repeat them.
In the future.
Yeah.
It's a heavy question.
It is.
But one that we need to grapple with.
We do.
I think it starts with awareness.
Absolutely.
By understanding the true history of the gold rush.
By acknowledging the suffering.
By acknowledging the suffering.
That took place.
That took place.
We can start to challenge those romanticized narratives.
It also obscures the truth.
It obscures the truth.
And it goes beyond just awareness.
It does.
Right.
It does. We need to
actively support policies that protect indigenous rights.
Absolutely.
That promote environmental sustainability.
Yes.
And that ensure that the benefits of progress are shared equitably. This deep dive has been emotionally challenging.
It has been.
But also incredibly eye-opening.
It has.
It's left me feeling a mix of sadness, anger, and a renewed sense of responsibility to make things right.
I agree. It's a reminder that history isn't just.
Yeah, it's not just.
Something we read about in textbooks.
Right.
It's a living force.
It shapes our world today.
That shapes our world today.
And we have a responsibility to engage with it, honestly.
To learn from it.
To learn from it. And to use that knowledge.
And to use that knowledge to create a better future.
To create a better future. So where do we go from here?
That's the question.
What can our listeners do?
Right. What can we all do?
To learn more.
To learn more and make a difference.
And make a difference.
I think a great place to start is by learning more about the California tribes that were impacted by the gold rush.
So going beyond the broad strokes of history. And really digging into the individual stories. The individual communities.
The individual communities that were affected. Precisely.
Learn about their art.
Yeah.
Their languages.
Yeah.
Their traditions. Seek out organizations.
That are working to support.
Their
ongoing fight. For justice and recognition.
Educate yourself and others about their history.
Their present-day challenges. And
how we can be allies. It's like you said earlier. History isn't just something.
It's alive.
In textbooks, it's alive.
And it continues to shape.
Our world. And we have a responsibility to learn from it.
We do.
To honor the memory of those who suffered. And to use that knowledge to create a better future. So the gold rush might be over. But its legacy lives on.
It does.
And it's up to each of us to ensure that the truth is told.
The
lessons are learned.
And
that we never forget. The human cost. Of this pursuit of gold. This deep dive has been a powerful reminder.
It has.
That even the most familiar stories often have hidden depths.
They do.
We encourage all of you listening to continue exploring this history.
To seek out
To seek out the untold stories.
The untold stories.
And to ask yourself.
Yeah, ask yourselves.
What responsibility do I have?
What responsibility do I have?
To learn from the past.
To learn from the past.
And create a more just.
Let's create a more just.
And equitable future.
An equitable future.
It's just incredible to think about how the gold rush, this seemingly isolated event, actually reflects larger patterns in American history.
It's true.
The shift from individual prospectors to powerful corporations. The disregard for both people and the environment. And the pursuit of profit.
The gold rush really does.
It's a story that's
serve as a microcosm
played out
of the American expansion westward.
Time and time again.
With all of its complexities and contradictions.
And that brings us to a crucial question.
It does.
What can we learn from this dark chapter in history? How do we ensure...
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
That these mistakes aren't repeated?
For me, it all starts with confronting that romanticized version of the gold rush. We need to acknowledge the brutal reality, the genocide that took place, and understand how that history continues to shape the present.
I think you're right. It's so easy to get caught up in the adventure, the lure of striking it rich.
Yeah, the romanticized idea of it all.
That we forget about the human cost. But we can't allow those romanticized narratives to overshadow the truth.
Exactly. And beyond simply acknowledging the past, we need to take concrete actions in the present.
Like what?
Supporting policies that protect indigenous rights. Advocating for environmental sustainability and holding corporations accountable for their impact on communities.
It feels overwhelming.
Yeah.
But I also feel this sense of responsibility.
Yeah.
To do something to make a difference.
I hear you.
Where do we even begin?
Well, we've talked a lot about the devastating impact of the gold rush on Native American tribes. A powerful way to start is by learning more about those specific tribes. Their cultures, their resilience.
You mean going beyond the broad strokes of history? And really digging into...
digging into those individual stories.
Those
individual communities.
The individual communities.
That were affected.
Learn about their art. Their languages, their traditions.
Seek out organizations.
That are working to support their ongoing fight.
To support their ongoing fight for justice and recognition.
Educate yourself and others about their history.
Their present-day challenges.
And
how we can be allies. It's like you said earlier. History isn't just something...
It's alive in textbooks.
It's alive, and it continues to shape our world. And we have a responsibility to learn from it.
We do.
To honor the memory of those who suffered.
And to use that knowledge. To create a better future. So the gold rush might be over. But its legacy lives on.
It does.
And it's up to each of us to ensure that the truth is told. The lessons are learned. And that we never forget the human cost. Of this pursuit of gold. This deep dive has been a powerful reminder.
It has.
That even the most familiar stories often have hidden depths.
They do.
We encourage all of you listening to continue exploring this history.
Absolutely.
To seek out the untold stories.
Yes. Seek out those untold stories.
And to ask yourselves, what responsibility do I have? To learn from the past and create a more just... and equitable future.
For everyone.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
We'll see you next time.